Hello there.
The cinema courtroom is now in session.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Cinema Courtroom jury, it is I, your one and only galactic host and judge, Mucker Mark, who is proud to launch a limited podcast series where all that we'll be talking about this week and the week after is the entirety of the Godfather trilogy, beginning with The Godfather, Part 1, but also titled The Godfather. If you happen to be tuning in to this podcast for the very first time ever, first and foremost, welcome. And if you're listening through Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, or even the Cinema Courtroom YouTube channel, which I know a majority of you tune in, while you may not be Don Carlone when it comes to granting favors, do me a rather simple one and click the thumbs up or follow button, because we also cover a bunch of other blockbuster pictures as well, including old and new releases. I heard Black Panther Wakanda Forever is just around the corner. You might get that in a few weeks' time. It is absolutely vital for your listening pleasure to tune in to this RSS feed weekly. And I mean, who knows? You might even find something that you might like or want to get introduced to for the first time. Now, without further ado, let us begin with our review topic to kick off this podcast series, The Godfather.
Ago, he bought the movie rights to this book, a bestseller. And the main character is a guy just like me. I wouldn't even have to act, just be myself. Godfather, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. You can act like a man. What's the matter with you? Is this how you turn down a Hollywood Pinocchio that cries like a woman? What can I do? What can I do? What is that, man? Religion. You spend time with your family? Sure I do. Good. Because a man that doesn't spend time with his family can never be a real man. You look terrible. I want you to eat. I want you to rest well, and a month from now, this Hollywood big shot's going to give you what you want. Too late. They start shooting in a week. I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
Whether you notice or not, there are many movies that like to focus on mafia and organized crime, but none of them are like The Godfather. Period. The goal of my review of this episode is to establish the final verdict of where Godfather stands in the overexpanding list of other classic and Oscar best pictures. I'm not talking about animations, I'm talking about pictures that consolidated rewards. However, the only way that I can establish that premise about The Godfather is if I first talk about the following elements: the story, editing, and acting performances. Because to me, those are the things that I love to talk about when it comes to a movie like Godfather, a true classic. Let's not waste any time and talk about the plot of this 3-hour movie. For one, the plot for The Godfather is nothing short of riveting. It describes an Italian man moving from Italy to New York. First off, the opening scene of the first act, where we got to see a 6 to 10 minute wedding to kick things off, was a artistic directing choice. And that is because in that one scene alone, we are acquainted with all of these characters, most of which are a vital chess piece for the narrative moving forward on. things don't bode well for most of these characters because these are the exact characters who the director obviously wants us to be invested in the second and third act of the movie. And especially Don Vito Corleone. Because after Don Vito Corleone gets shot, Sonny, who is his first born child, is given command of the crime family. A character who dies later in the movie, by the way, and inspired the infamous scene that gets memed a lot. Look how they massacred my boy. You know no one? Like, it's even mixed in the main cinema courtroom intro. I digress to say that the plot for the Godfather movie can be explained to someone watching it for the first time as this. Mafia boss, who is known as the Godfather, passes down his criminal empire to his son. Because that's literally what this movie is. Ultimately, Michael Corleone ends up leading the organization after Sonny's death, Vito's firstborn, but it still doesn't alter the fact that the criminal empire signifies such a powerful legacy for the Corleone family, and it gets passed down to the next person in line. It almost feels like a mafia monarch in a way, you know? So that aspect of the plot was very intriguing and preserved my attention span for every second of this goddamn Godfather movie. Okay, now let's move on to how The Godfather is edited, because the way that it is edited is rather simple, because obviously when it came to the production of this movie, it had to use whatever editing software that they could get their hands on in the 1970s. But other than that, despite the Windows Movie Maker style of it, the editing is effective and subtle, and that's why I think that unfortunately the film industry today had allowed the luxury of advanced editing and CGI technology get in the way of their minds a lot, because I don't think that any movie that's being made in this day and age, never mind the social undertones and slurs being used in this film, like, I don't think any movie is going to be able to comprehend what masterpiece movies that stood the test of time, like what limited resources and softwares are at your disposal. As a result, a movie being released in 2022 might end up half-assing the product because we're like, oh, the advanced program is going to fix everything. Whereas The Godfather, with the simple editing that it had, you know, the fade in and fade outs and the transition from scene X to Y, the occasional black screen after something big happens, even though the editing was merely that, it actually told us what was in the screenplay, and of course kept things organized. Alright, now that we've conversed about the Godfather plot, the subtle but effective way that it was edited, I want to talk about the acting performances. First things first when it comes to the acting performance. Marlon Brando gives an exceptional performance as Don Vito Corleone. Laugh all you want, because the look how they massacred my boy has become a meme now. But that scene sealed the performance of Don Vito Corleone's performance beautifully. That and the last scene where he collapses and dies in the present day. And yes, that means that I'm going to be talking about him in Friday's episode of the Cinema Courtroom Show. But anyway, the scene where Don Vito Corleone dies really tugs on the average moviegoer's emotions. And while that moment is an excellent plot point in itself, especially for a third act, it wouldn't have been as nearly as impactful without Marlon Brando acting the role. Full stop. I just want to talk about one more thing, and this might sound like I'm criticizing the Godfather movie. I promise you that I'm not. But Al Capone, who plays Michael Corleone in The Godfather, and this is one of the first times that I have to mention this, but he overacted. Every scene that Michael Corleone has shared with Kay, it was like it was ripped straight off of a play, and as a result, it stripped away whatever realism there was to be had, In those moments, it's almost like I wanted to tell them, calm down, my bruder. This isn't a live action performance. Narrow the drama down a notch, But other than that, I think that the acting performances in Godfather is one of the best performances in Hollywood. Hands down. And I'm not just saying that because every movie critic is saying it. And it's somehow, cool to just go with what everyone else is saying. For a matter of fact, I can tell that some of you are going to question my nitpick about Al Capino's acting in the comment section below. And I'm perfectly fine with that. So, bring it on. The Cinema Courtroom contends that Godfather is a masterpiece when it comes to the production value of the time. One of the best, if not the number one, acting performances in Hollywood. And a riveting and accomplished narrative, well, at least until Godfather Part 2. Maybe. Which you are going to indeed be hearing my thoughts on this Friday. So, keep on the lookout for that. And now we begin to approach the second half of the Cinema Courtroom show, which is the post-sentencing hearing. What is the post-sentencing hearing, you may ask? Well, I'm glad you asked about this. In the first half of the Cinema Courtroom podcast, we reviewed The Godfather, which is one of many films that I've selected, old and new, big and small, underrated and overrated, the broken and the damned, black, white, brown, orange, and blue. Then, in the second half of this podcast, I assemble all of the leftover topics that pertain to the film industry in general, movie news and movie-relevant subject matters that aren't just relevant to one specific movie, and integrate it into one post-sentencing hearing list. Think of it as an after-party that is long overdue, where you, yes you, the awesome listeners tuning in on Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, or the Cinema Courtroom YouTube channel, you name it, or, in judiciary terms, an invitation to a retrial in order to rectify an unfair hearing. Because sometimes, or all of the time really, like the organic sapient that I find myself to be, I also find that I've been too critically generous or harsh about a movie. So the majority of the time, or all of the time, my opinions do change after a rewatch or two of the content, which means I'm compelled to review the motion picture again in a post-sentencing hearing. If you enjoy what you're hearing, what I have to say, if you have done so already, I would very much appreciate it if you give this podcast a reshare and like this episode by clicking the thumbs up or heart icon on whatever platform that you're listening on. As I've mentioned before, this podcast can be accessible on Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, or the Cinema Courtroom YouTube channel, where not only are you going to get the 21 audio feeds uploaded, but you're also going to get exclusive video content, which you won't find anywhere else on Spotify, Stitcher, Google, or Amazon. That being said, I salute you in advance for your generous engagement and support, and I hope you continue to join us in the ride to success if you'd ever feel so inclined. In this hearing, we are going to cover the following: the proper order to watch Star Wars in, Rihanna's new song for Black Panther, my top 3 expectations for Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, which is coming out in a week and a half from now, and why censorship in movies is a flawed notion. Enjoy. Alright, it should be of no surprise to anyone why I love Star Wars. The appeal of Star Wars is the idea of aliens, droids, and humans coexisting in harmony without a second thought, and that ideas for new planets are almost everlasting. I would recommend that you watch the show Andor on Disney+, 9th episode coming tomorrow, because it embraces the essence of what Star Wars is truly about. But for now, if you happen to be hearing about Star Wars for the very first time ever, and by the way, there are 3 movies that you need to watch in order to really be a movie pundit. Godfather, which I already reviewed, and Star Wars. And then Lord of the Rings, of course, which is my favorite movie of all time. But that's a discussion for another time. Because if you're interested in getting started with watching Star Wars, I'm going to talk about what order to really view Star Wars in. Except the suggestion for what order isn't going to come from me. It's going to come from the creator of Star Wars himself, George Lucas. And then, I'm going to share whether or not I agree. Because yes, I might be questioning George Lucas' opinions. Am I in the right place to even do that? Wow, Makram. That's low. Anyways, I quote George Lucas with the following phrase. Start with 1. That's the way to do it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's the way they're supposed to be done. Just because it took a long time to film it doesn't mean you don't do it in order. By the way, that last bit actually is a very fascinating point that I've thought about for a while, because he does have a point. The story does begin in Phantom Menace, even though it was filmed after The Return of the Jedi. But here is where this might shock you. I am going to tell the creator of Star Wars to his face that I don't agree with him. Hear that, George? I don't agree with you. Because listen, when we're talking about how the quality of the Star Wars movies evolved over the years, I think that it is better to not have to deal with watching Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith with an enhanced production quality. And by the way, something that you need to understand about the Phantom Menace, it set the precedent of how special effects and CGI were to be incorporated in other sci-fi movies. And laugh all you want, but Jar Jar Binks actually changed the sci-fi movie industry. Yep, that's right. I'm sorry, but it's true. George Lucas even said in an interview that Jar Jar Binks is a key to all of us. Now, when it's taken out of context, people like to say, oh, Jar Jar Binks is the new Sith Lord, or maybe he's going to restore balance to the Force. Obviously, it's a joke, because we have Anakin and we have Palpatine. But I'm not kidding when I'm going to say that Jar Jar Binks was vital for not only Star Wars, but the movie industry as well. Especially sci-fi movies that, want to incorporate stuff that requires heavy visuals. Aliens, galactic space, laser fights, stuff like that. Now, to have all of this being downgraded by watching A New Hope after watching Revenge of the Sith. Like, imagine watching the Obi-Wan versus Anakin duel in Revenge of the Sith, rapid lightsaber swings, zoom, 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 and cinematic lava, which was probably animated. But then you watch A New Hope next. For some reason, I can't wrap my head around not watching Star Wars in release order, because then it'll go from fast lightsaber battles to a slow and wonky lightsaber duel in A New Hope. Because I guarantee you, if A New Hope had a higher budget, or perhaps if it was made later on with advanced tech, then maybe the lightsaber fight between Darth Vader and Obi-Wan in A New Hope would have been a tad more faster. On the other hand, the order to really view Star Wars in is subjective at the end of the day here. One might argue that the journey of watching Anakin grow to a genocidal warlord, Darth Vader, and then seek a path of redemption might just be worth going through the production quality hassle of watching it in chronological order. At the same time, it is honestly dependent on one variable. The viewers like me and you, who are either invested in what time a film has been released, or the chronological arrangement of the narrative. And Also, I'm really interested in whether or not a movie aligned with the industrial production standards of that specific time. So A New Hope was perfectly good for the time that it has been released. In fact, one might say it's revolutionary. So, I don't know. Do you think you know? Let me know in the comment section below or at our Twitter inbox at Cinema Courtroom. Black Panther Wakanda Forever is coming out very, very, very soon. And something that I've been anticipating for in particular for the sequel is the exclusive soundtrack that they always have prepared for the movie, made by individual artists. For the first time, we had Kendrick Lamar make All the Stars and Pray For Me. Both tracks we got to hear in Black Panther. All the Stars was played in the closing credit scene for Black Panther, and then we had Pray For Me, which played in the scene with T'Challa Nakia ascending down the stairs in the casino, where we also saw the infamous Stan Lee just impressing us with his cameo performance. Rest in peace, Stan. And it blew the record charts. I think those two tracks were just pure awesome. And by the way, I'm not going to exclude Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. It also had songs made by individual artists that I immensely enjoyed. To see that Rihanna, after years of not releasing a song, dropped an exclusive song for Black Panther Wakanda Forever was pretty interesting. So I decided to go on my Spotify and I typed in Lift Me Up, and let me just say, when I hit the play icon and the audio began to flow in my ears, I would be such a massive liar and so full of shit if I said that I wasn't a bit moved by it. And the reason I was quite moved by the song is because, this song was obviously made for Chadwick Boseman, an actor that I respect quite a lot in the cinema industry. Lift Me Up captured the right emotions. Rihanna's raspy voice was also right on tune. So, there's that. I'm going to get into my top 3 expectations for Wakanda Forever right after I'm done with this topic. But I have a feeling that not only based on the positive reviews for Wakanda Forever, but the soundtrack for Wakanda Forever alone, I'm going to end up really liking Wakanda Forever. And I think when you make a good song and then release it before you premiere the movie, I think it's kind of like, it boosts the marketing, because if the music for the film is good, then it's like, it gives you more of an incentive to watch the movie, just so you can see the context in which Lift Me Up is going to be played. So Rihanna, I don't listen to much of your music, nor do I intend to. I couldn't, be the least interested. But in the 0.0001 chance that you're tuning into this podcast, then I just want to say, well done. I approve. At least for this song. And if only I could just play a portion of the track right here on this show. But alas, copyright embargoes are existent for a reason. Because the song is truly exceptional. Black Panther 2, Wakanda Forever, is going to be distributed to theatrical chains worldwide. That being said, I think that this is the best time to do what I always do in the cinema courtroom whenever there's an upcoming blockbuster, filled with anticipation and hype. Go over any expectations I might have for that movie. In which case, my top 3 expectations for Wakanda Forever, and they involve the following. I expect Wakanda Forever to deal with the fallout of Chadwick Boseman's, otherwise known as King T'Challa's, death. Not only should they deal with T'Challa's death, they must also retain the cultural impact that the first Black Panther movie had, and explore Namor's origin in depth. No pun intended. Let's start with the first expectation that I briefly mentioned, dealing with the fallout of King T'Challa's death in a way that is convincing and serves the story in a riveting manner. I don't want him to just make his death a cop-out. I expect solid storytelling to elaborate on why the king of the most powerful nation on the frickin' planet is dead. What are the consequences of his death? Why is it sudden? What does it contribute to the grand arc of the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Wakanda Forever is meant to wrap up Phase 4 of the MCU, so what is something that this Black Panther sequel can do to utilize T'Challa's unexpected death in a way that fans will have something to take away from Phase 4 as a whole? If the movie can explore that effectively, then it's likely to get a good review from me, because it would then be a clear indication that despite the unfortunate circumstance of Chadwick Boseman's death in real life, the people at Marvel and Ryan Coogler bounced back while they were still having their own time to grieve, of course, and deliver a Black Panther movie that's just as good, if not better, than the first one. And obviously, because it's a sequel, I want it to be better. So we got the first expectation down. Let's move on to the second one. Black Panther obviously carries a lot of cultural impact, and I think that is what made Black Panther appealing to begin with. Now, you might know me too well. I despise political commentary when it's incorporated in my entertainment at all. But I think I can make an exception when it comes to that, with a superhero that's literally called Black Panther. In case you're unaware of the whole conception behind it, Stan Lee created Black Panther as a means to represent the Black Panther Party, which was formed as a Black Power organization. My point is that the first Black Panther movie dealt with how African American culture is being ripped away from them, poverty issues, and the war that was being waged on drugs, which Killmonger was exposed to. He wasn't exposed to drugs, but he grew up in the neighborhood. And by the way, here is a little bit of historic trivia. The CIA was allegedly involved in trafficking cocaine to black neighborhoods so that they could then utilize those funds from the drugs to assist the Contra rebels. This, of course, skyrocketed the crime rates in those neighborhoods. But anyway, that is slightly off topic to talk about in depth, but I mean, the whole concept of Black Panther was to turn all of these real, historic, social, and political issues and incorporate it into the fictional world of Wakanda. I am not a part of the demographic who the movie is trying to represent, but what I think, what me and what any average moviegoer should pick up from the second Black Panther installment is first and foremost, how did the snap affect the African continent? Exploring this premise would most likely follow up on the ending of the last Black Panther movie, effectively, because it boils down to another question. Did Wakanda follow up on their promise to distribute their vibranium resources with other countries? Did they share? What if, let's say, there were a number of African countries who are already struggling based on real-world statistics? Now, what if there are some African countries who received less help from Wakanda? What would be the cultural implications of that? If Black Panther 2 Wakanda Forever explores these themes, then it would be the perfect conclusion for Phase 4 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Because, in case you hadn't noticed already, most of Marvel's Phase 4 live-action movies and TV shows had been dealing with the fallout of the snap. Perhaps too many times, or the blip, as the characters in MCU like to label it. To have the final movie of Phase 4 bring all of these elements to full circle will definitely appeal to the audience who are invested in the post-blip era of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and how our characters are going to fully recover from the snap altogether. Especially, and we haven't seen this before in Phase 4, how does an entire nation survive from Thanos' actions? Now that I've talked about my expectation of Wakanda Forever retaining cultural impact like the first installment did, let's talk about one more expectation. I expect Wakanda Forever to use its 2-hour runtime to explore Namor, the first ever mutant to be introduced in a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, in substantial depth. Comic book readers know this already, but Atlanteans and Wakandans have been known for engaging in heavy conflict. Furthermore, it is not a coincidence that Namor has been heavily featured in the marketing for the Black Panther movie. With that comic book appeal in mind, there's no getting around exhibiting a multi-dimensional portrayal of him. Do they have to make him the center lead of the movie? No. What they should do is give him a fair amount of screen time and perhaps get down to the logistics of how mutants are going to be in the MCU, starting with Wakanda Forever. You literally have Namor, who could initiate exposition for that very moment that we get to hear of the mutants in a live-action MCU project. We've probably heard it in Ms. Marvel, but it's very different to hear it in a full-on feature-length movie. So, just to summarize my 3 expectations for Black Panther. Expectation number 1, deal with the fallout of Chadwick Boseman's death. Expectation number 2, preserve the cultural impact that the first Black Panther had. And expectations number 3, utilize its 2-hour runtime to explore Namor as a mutant. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. My 3 expectations for Black Panther Wakanda Forever, coming to theaters worldwide on November 10th, 2022. What are your expectations for the Black Panther sequel? Are they the same as mine? Perhaps it might be a little different or a little more. Whatever it is, let me know in the comment section below or at our Twitter inbox at Cinema Courtroom. I want to talk about another fascinating subject that has been relevant for as long as art has existed. Censorship, especially in motion pictures. And I want to get started by saying, this shouldn't be a debatable notion to begin with. But unfortunately, in this day and age and cancel culture, it is. If a movie is not woke enough, not politically correct, even though it might be set in a certain time period, but who cares about that, right? Not enough diversity quotas filled, someone who's getting chased by the counterculture mob happens to be acting in it, then the movie gets put in the shelf. It is unfortunately as simple as that. My closing argument is going to hopefully convince the jury why censorship in movies is a flawed notion. For one, censorship is basically a synonym of fuck creativity. Sure, it might preserve what is and isn't acceptable in countries that have rigid customs and policies, but the way I view things is that if you're not willing to criticize the whole film, then why has it been released at all in the first place? The whole conception of movies and art was to showcase a filmmaker and artist's vision without leaving anything out, to entertain the masses and thus inform them. Maybe even change their way of thinking or the way that they see the world. I mean, that's the beauty of art in general, right? Censoring a piece of art just barricades the artist's creative energy. It limits or altogether eliminates the artist's impact, rendering the movie useless. And to do what exactly? Maintain harmony with the cinema industry in China? If you have to censor a movie to maintain the so-called peace, then why release it at all? The reason why I'm particularly mad about the notion of censorship overall is because there are individuals who say that they're informed about the past, and that they detest groups like the Nazis, who censored people just so they can traffic propaganda to the German people. But then, those same people, when they see something that they don't like, something entirely subjective. Oh, and just so you know, I am saying this as someone who believes that movies are not all subjective. Movies can be subjective, but not all of the time. I digress to say that these people want a movie that doesn't have enough diversity to their liking. They want it to be an echo chamber. And if there's an actor that they don't like, they either want the movie to be reshot. We're seeing that with DC's upcoming movie, The Flash, if it's going to be released at all. They want the movie to be edited down or cut out altogether. I mean, how is that different from censorship in the past? I want to talk about one more quick thing before I wrap up this segment. Censorship can make a movie feel like it's out of context because every element of a film is vital in order for the general audience to comprehend what's occurring. Every talking scene, action scene, photography shot, even the colors, all of it is an essential puzzle piece. If a character happens to say something offensive, and there are people who don't like it, which they have every right to do, then at least they get to engage with the movie and hating the character who said that offensive thing. It makes it realistic. It keeps things grounded, because we're portraying human beings. If someone said something to deliberately offend you, you have every right to be mad at them, but unlike a movie that cannot be censored, see, we underestimate the power of movies. We have the ability to bend them to our will. We can edit a shot. We can make it shorter or keep the size. But anyway, about that offensive thing that you heard, what I'm really trying to convey is that you already heard it, and you can choose how to engage with it, because there's no censorship in the real world. Hunt down the person, John Wick style, or just move on. Well, I mean, that's none of my business, but you get what I'm saying. My point is that the job of a motion picture is to communicate a message, and every piece of it is fundamental in order to communicate that message. Censorship prevents everything from happening the way that it should, and as a result, it might hinder the quality of the picture. The question I have for you now is, what do you think about censorship in movies? Do you concur with what I had said? And I mean, hey, I am aware of a fair number of people that just want censorship in movies, whether it be for maintaining harmony, social issues, or whatever. For a matter of fact, even though I want the people who agree with me to comment their thoughts, I want more people who disagree with me. And I know, this might or might not be a bad idea for both sides, but I honestly don't care. So anyways, whatever it is, leave me your uncensored thoughts in the comment section below or our Twitter inbox at Cinema Courtroom. We have now reached the end of this podcast. Thank you very much from the bottom of my heart for tuning in to the Cinema Courtroom Show, where we critique movies. I had a lot of fun doing this podcast, believe me. So make sure to subscribe if you enjoyed episode 21 of the Cinema Courtroom Show, just as I do every week, making them just for you. I hope to see you guys again in the next episode, where we're going to talk about The Godfather Part 2.
I know it was you, Fredo. You broke my heart. You broke my heart.
Find out my thoughts on The Godfather 2 when the next and 22nd episode of the Cinema Courtroom Show launches this coming Friday on YouTube, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Anchor, and, of course, the Amazon Music platform. Thank you once again for listening till the end. I am your galactic judge, Marco Mark, and it was an absolute honor hosting you this evening. And I hope you have a spectacular, spectacular day.
Hello there.
Court is now dismissed.